Cut and Shoot, Texas, January 3, 2017. The morning fog still clung to the trees in Cut and Shoot, Texas, a rural patch of pine and pasture just outside of Conroe. Daniel's final shift of work began at 8:30 a.m. that morning. The neighborhood was waking up, coffee brewing, dogs barking. Somewhere down the road, a chainsaw started. At the top of a 35-foot tree, 51-year-old Daniel, an experienced tree cutter and the owner of the small landscaping company, stood with his boots balanced on two split limbs, saw buzzing at his hip. He'd already cut the top section, just as he'd done 100 times before. Maybe more. This was routine, familiar. He knew this tree like he knew his tools, by feel. The canopy swayed gently. Not much wind, but enough to make the bark beneath his soles feel less like solid ground and more like guesswork. He wore special cleats on his boots that allowed him to grip the sides of the tree trunk for a solid footing. He wore a special safety belt around his waist that attached to a lanyard that went around the tree trunk to keep him balanced and to free up his hands for using the chainsaw. Just now, he finished cutting top of the tree, and it fell down below. This part of the job was done, and he placed his tools securely on his belt to free up his hands to climb down. He reached for the trunk, bracing to descend. But his lanyard was caught on some tree debris. He hugged the trunk and detached himself from the lanyard to clear the material. Then, he placed his tools carefully back in their holsters and started to descend once more. One foot, then the other. Then it happened. A shift, a slip, and Daniel was falling. He forgot to reattach his lanyard, and when he leaned back, expecting the support his lanyard would provide, but there was no resistance. 35 feet is long enough to think, long enough to feel the world turn sideways, and long enough to regret. His fingers reached for the ring on his belt where the safety belt was supposed to be connected to, but it wasn't. His eyes gazed skyward, toward where he was a moment ago, and right before he met the ground, he could see it. The safety lanyard dangling from the tree trunk 30 feet up, unused and unattached. Daniel hit the ground hard. Neighbors heard the thud, but by the time anyone reached him, his breathing was shallow. By the time he reached the hospital, it had stopped. The neighbors, he was wearing a safety belt, that much was clear. But the lanyard, the thing that ties you to the belt, the thing that turns a belt into a lifeline, it wasn't clipped in, and that was it. OSHA did a post-fatality investigation, but there were no citations issued. Daniel owned the company, he made the call, and was the one that got hurt. Houston, Texas, January 5, 2017. The sun beat down on the rooftop of a warehouse just outside Houston. It was January, but in Texas, winter is more of a suggestion than season. The sky was high, the heat steady, the metal roofing warm underfoot. At 2:45 p.m., a 48-year-old technician named Marcus was on the roof to do something simple: collect serial and model numbers from the air conditioning units. A clipboard in one hand, he weaved his way between the vents and condensers, the hum of machinery vibrating faintly beneath the soles of his boots. The white material on the roof reflected the sun up to him. He was getting cooked from both above and below. He worked quickly to save himself from the heat. The rooftop was a patchwork of panels, some sturdy steel and others were fiberglass, meant to let in filtered light below. But excessive UV exposure had left the fiberglass faded and weak, and it was never meant to be stepped on at all. Marcus had never been told which panels were safe to walk on. Warehouse rooftops were unfamiliar to him, and the hazards there blended in with everything else. He knew to stay away from the edges, of course, but it never occurred to him there may be other ways a person could fall to their death here. He paused near one of the units, stepped sideways to get a better view of the serial number. Unfortunately, the best view of that number happened to be on top of one of the fiberglass panels. One foot, then the other, and then his whole weight pushed down. The panel gave way, cracking underneath his full weight. He reached out, grasping for something to hold on to, but his arms were only met with the jagged edge of the shattered panel. There was no scream, just the sudden, muffled snap of fiberglass cracking under pressure, followed by the sickening silence that always comes after something irreversible. Marcus fell straight through the roof. The drop wasn't far by rooftop standards, just one story, but he hit the concrete floor of the warehouse head first. A single impact, sure, but that's all it took. By the time help arrived, the damage was done. OSHA was called and an investigation commenced. They issued the company Marcus worked for with just a single serious violation, a violation for a situation that, unfortunately, is all too common among negligent companies. Failure to provide and document training on workplace hazards. No mention of warning labels. No mention of a safety monitor. No mention of what should have been said before anyone was ever sent onto that roof. The fine? $3,803. A human life exchanged for less than the cost of one of the units he was sent to inspect. Marcus didn't fall because of bad luck. He fell because no one ever told him where not to step. The company he worked for didn't bother putting him through the proper training he would need when in a warehouse environment. Information that would undeniably save his life.